There were lakes, where even the wind seemed afraid to linger. On quiet summer nights, when the moon turned the water into silver, the villages grew strangely silent. No one hurried home. No one sang. No one called across the shore. Because everyone knew that some voices should never be answered. The old people believed that if you heard a young woman singing across the water, you must never follow the sound, no matter how beautiful it seemed, no matter how lonely it felt. Because in the oldest Slavic legends, the one waiting beside the lake was never simply a beautiful girl. She was a Rusalka. Long before maps gave names to rivers and lakes, people had already learned that not every place welcomed the living. Some forests felt older than the villages beside them. Some rivers carried stories no one wished to repeat. And some lakes were said to remember. During the day, they looked no different from any other stretch of water. Fishermen cast their nets, children played along the shore, women washed clothes at the water's edge. Life continued as it always had. But when evening came, everything changed. The same paths became strangely empty. Conversations grew quieter. Doors closed earlier than usual. The shore, so full of life only hours before, was left completely abandoned. No one wanted to be the last person standing beside the lake after sunset, not because they feared the darkness. The people who lived there knew darkness well. They feared what could hide behind a familiar voice. For centuries, stories passed from one generation to the next. Stories of singing carried across perfectly still water. Stories of someone calling your name from the opposite shore. Stories of figures that looked almost human, until they smiled. The old Slavs believed that every lake possessed its own spirit. Some waters healed, some protected, others demanded respect. But there were places where the boundary between the living and the dead seemed dangerously thin. People believed that those waters did not simply reflect the world above them. They held memories beneath their surface, and sometimes, on quiet, moonlit nights, those memories rose from the depths. That was where the oldest stories of the Rusalka began. Unlike many spirits of Slavic folklore, a Rusalka was never believed to have existed since the beginning of the world. Long before these stories were ever written down, they had already been whispered, beside rivers, lakes, and forest marshes for countless generations. Most historians trace the legend of the Rusalka back to the earliest Slavic communities, long before Christianity spread across Eastern Europe. No one knows exactly where the first story was told. Perhaps no one ever will, because legends like these were never born in books. They were carried from one generation to the next, spoken beside evening fires, shared in quiet villages, and remembered wherever people believed the water was listening. According to those ancient stories, no child was ever born a Rusalka. She had once been someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone who had laughed, dreamed, and believed she still had a lifetime ahead of her. The old stories never agreed on a single beginning. Every village remembered something different, Some believed she had drowned beneath dark waters. Others spoke of young women whose hearts had been broken by betrayal, grief, or unbearable sorrow. There were tales of brides who died before their wedding day, their future stolen before it had even begun. And in many places, people believed that anyone whose life ended too soon, before love, before family, before the life they had dreamed of, might never truly leave this world. No one claimed to know which story was true. Perhaps all of them were. Perhaps none were. Because the legends were never meant to explain the Rusalka. They were meant to explain the grief people could not understand. The old Slavs believed that powerful sorrow did not simply disappear. It lingered. It settled into lonely places, into abandoned paths, into silent forests, and above all, into still water. Water reflected the sky, but according to the old tales, it also remembered every tear, every promise, and every life that had ended beneath its surface. That was why people feared certain lakes, long after the names of the dead had been forgotten. Because they believed the lake never forgot those it had taken. The old stories rarely described the Rusalka as a monster. In fact, that was precisely what made her so dangerous. From a distance, she looked like any other young woman standing beside a quiet lake. Nothing about her revealed what she truly was. No scales, no tail, no monstrous features. Only long dark hair, pale skin, a soaked white dress that drifted with the water. In the oldest Slavic traditions, the Rusalka was never a creature of the sea. She belonged to rivers, lakes, marshes, and quiet pools hidden deep within the forests. She looked completely human, and that was exactly why people trusted what they saw. Sometimes she stood beneath the branches of an ancient willow. Sometimes she waited silently among the reeds. Sometimes she remained motionless, waist deep in the water, as though she had always belonged there. Those who claimed to have seen her rarely spoke of fear at first. They spoke of beauty. Her voice was said to drift across the water as softly as the evening wind. Some believed she sang. Others said she simply whispered a name, a familiar name, your own. The old tales warned that no one else could hear it, only the one being called. That was why so many stories began the same way. Someone stopped walking, someone turned towards a lake, someone took one more step, and then another, not out of fear, not by force, but because they believed someone was waiting for them. Some legends claimed the Rusalka never had to pull anyone beneath the water. The lake did the rest. By the time the spell had broken, the shore was already too far away. Only then did they realize they were no longer alone. For the people who lived near these lakes, the Rusalka was never just another story. She became part of everyday life. Children were taught from an early age which paths to avoid after sunset. Fishermen returned before darkness settled over the water. Even those who laughed at the old tales often found themselves walking a little faster when the evening mist began to rise. Over time, the warnings became traditions. No one lingered by the shore at night. No one answered a voice calling from across the lake. No one followed singing carried by the wind. not because they knew the stories were true, but because no one wished to discover they were. Every village kept its own customs. In some places, young women floated flower wreaths upon the water during Rusalka, believing the restless spirits would follow the current instead of wandering among the living. Elsewhere, families left small offerings of bread or ribbons beside rivers and lakes, not as worship, but as a gesture of respect toward forces they believed should never be mocked. Whether these rituals truly protected anyone, no one could say. Perhaps they survived for another reason. They reminded people that nature was never something to conquer, only something to live beside. And perhaps that quiet respect kept more people alive than they ever realized. Centuries passed, villages disappeared, forests were cleared, old roads faded beneath new ones. Yet the stories remained. They changed with every generation. Each village remembered the Rusalka a little differently. Some imagined her as a guardian of forgotten waters. Others believed she was a restless soul searching for the life she had lost. In some places, people feared her. In others, they pitied her. Perhaps that is why the legend endured for so long, because it was never only about fear. It was about loss, about promises left unfulfilled, about lives that ended before they had truly begun. Every generation recognized something of itself in those stories. A different sorrow, a different longing, a different unanswered question. Even today, many lakes remain perfectly ordinary by daylight, but when evening falls and the wind suddenly grows quiet, people still find themselves listening, just for a moment, as though expecting to hear a distant voice carried across the water. Perhaps legends survive because they remind us of the things we cannot explain. Or perhaps because some places never truly let go of the stories they keep. Today, most people imagine the Rusalka as little more than another mermaid, a beautiful woman with the tail of a fish living beneath the sea. But that was never how the oldest Slavic stories described her. The Rusalka belonged to fresh water, to quiet lakes, slow rivers, hidden marshes, forest springs where the water barely moved. The sea was never her home, and neither was a fish's tail. In the oldest traditions, she walked, she stood upon the shore, she wandered among the reeds. She could leave the water whenever she wished, because she had once been human. That was precisely what made the legend so unsettling. From a distance, there was nothing to reveal what she truly was. Over the centuries, the old stories traveled far beyond the villages where they were first whispered. As different cultures met, the image of the Rusalka slowly blended with tales of sea maidens and mermaids. Little by little, the two legends became one. The fish tale remained. The ancient lake was forgotten. Yet in the oldest Slavic traditions, the Rusalka never belonged to the sea. She belonged to places where the water stood perfectly still and where people believed the lake was listening. The old stories never tell us exactly where truth ends and legend begins. Perhaps they were never meant to. for the people who first whispered these tales. It was enough to know that some places deserved respect. Some waters deserved silence. Even today, there are forgotten lakes where the wind suddenly grows still, where the moon rests upon the water, and nothing seems to move. Yet somehow, and it never feels empty. Whether the Rusalka ever truly existed, no one can say. But perhaps that was never the question. Because legends are not remembered for the answers they give. They are remembered for the feeling they leave behind. So if one quiet evening you ever find yourself standing beside an ancient lake, and somewhere across the water, you think you hear a distant song or a gentle voice calling your name, perhaps it is wiser not to answer. The lake never forgets.